Another episode of the MMA Minute. We have a huge weekend of fights coming up with UFC 299 and Francis Ngannou versus Anthony Joshua. So much fights to talk about. And we also have UFC 298 to recap from last week that we absolutely nailed. So just to start off right away, I only did a parlay with the main card, but we got every single fight right. Starting with the Anthony Hernandez and Roman Kopylov fight. Let's take Anthony Hernandez, the American, side with him, beating the Dagestani rat. There we go. So we got that one. First one of the night. I'm not going to lie, it was kind of a shot in the dark there. Didn't know much about either guy. Looking at Anthony Hernandez's past record, he obviously has been pretty beating Edmund Shabazian. I think we talked about that was pretty impressive, somewhat of an impressive win. And Roman Kopylov really didn't have much for him in that fight. So, yeah, Anthony Hernandez gets a submission victory over the Dagestani, which was cool to see. So, after Anthony Hernandez and Roman Kopylov, we had the Merab versus Henry Cejudo fight. Kind of went the way we said it would. So, for the Merab-Cejudo fight, kind of had the same feeling as the Ian Machado-Gary fight in the sense that it was a young guy in Merab and Ian Gary, both in the same boat on the trajectory up in their career. And not that Jeff Neal's on a spiral down, but it just kind of seemed like the way Gary's career is going it just seemed to me like he has all the hype behind him. And Jeff Neal, granted that he is more of a stand and bang type of guy, really couldn't get anything going with Ian Gary. Kind of a slow fight. More, I would say, less entertaining than the Cejudo versus Merab fight. But I thought the Merab-Cejudo fight was going to be the boring one. Not that it was super entertaining, but, Merab wrestles him over the course of 3 rounds like he does. And then Ian Gary gets kind of another not super entertaining win. So for as stacked as this card was, it really didn't perform that well. But and then we got Rob Whittaker versus Paulo Costa, the fight that actually did end up happening. I think we all might have been a little surprised about that, but Rob does get the victory and probably not going to be fighting for the title in his next fight, but I'd say one more one more win against a top contender. But, there's not much Rob has proved, or there's not much more Rob has to prove. He lost to Dricus. Dricus ended up becoming the champ, so hindsight doesn't look as bad, but we did get that fight, and now Rob's probably going to fight like Cannonier or somebody like that, a rematch for him. And then Ilya versus Alexander Volkanovski. This was the fight that, I don't know. Most people didn't really seem to think that Ilya was going to get the win here for some reason. Obviously, we predicted him to, but, and honestly, let me pull up my prediction from the last video because I kind of hit the nail right on the head with how this fight was going to go. I referenced the Chad Mendes fight and how it was their similar bodies between Ilya and Chad Mendes, those shorter guys who aren't afraid to kind of get in the pocket with them. He left his chin high. Volk did. It might have been too quick of a turnaround, and then Ilya tagged him. Let me play the clip from last week's episode. You guys remember Volk fought Chad Mendes a long time ago. I think it was Mendes' last fight in the UFC, and they were throwing hands. And it's these short guys who are the same size as Volk who just get in there and they aren't afraid to crack with him like Chad Mendes wasn't back in the day. I feel like Ilya's going to be the same. Get in the pocket, and he won't be scared to throw heat with Volk. And I wouldn't be surprised if Volk was to shoot a takedown on him because... So pretty much absolutely nailed that. I don't know how many other people got that prediction as, hitting the nail on the head as I did there. Not to toot my own horn there, but definitely nailed that. But so let's fast forward to why we're here. 299 stacked card, guys. Just looking at it right now, it's absolutely insane. Even the early prelims. So not going to make predictions for the whole card. Just going to focus on certain early prelim matches. Michel Pereira versus Michael, I'm not even sure how to pronounce his last name. He's coming off a win. I think his last fight was, I don't even know when. I think it was a long time ago. I think it was in August, maybe in the summer. But Michel Pereira, obviously everybody is a huge Michel Pereira fan. I don't think I've ever seen the guy lose a UFC fight. So just based off that, we always side with Michel Pereira just based off how entertaining he is. And then the next fight of the night, Ion Cutelaba, same can be said for him, but just reverse. I don't think I've ever seen the guy win a fight in the UFC. Other than his last fight, they gave him Tanner Boser, an absolute can. I think I might have even said that Ion was going to beat him in that fight, but yeah, he's fighting Felipe Lins. Don't know much about Felipe Lins, but I'm just going to take him because if you're fighting Ion Cutelaba, you're probably going to knock him out. But those are the early prelims, guys. Those are two. I'm not going to say Michel Pereira is a can't-miss fighter. So that, for being on the early prelims, is really, really cool to watch. And not going to be one you want to miss. So, and then Pedro Munoz, Kyler Phillips. That's a great fight, too. Kind of got the young guy, Kyler Phillips, coming up to fight Pedro Munoz, who has had kind of somewhat of a rocky past few fights. Munoz ranked 13th here, and then Kyler Phillips trying to crack into the rankings here. I don't think he's going to be able to. I see Munoz probably getting a decision victory here. He's the more experienced guy, and he also just fought Chito Vera, who is fighting for the title on the same card, and they fought to a decision. So I think Munoz will probably beat Kyler here. They actually have him as the underdog, which is surprising. I think Kyler Phillips might train with Sean O'Malley, which is why he's fighting on this card. I could be wrong. But, yeah, I don't know. Kyler Phillips lost to Julian Paiva, so I'll take Pedro Munoz on that one. Then Gamrot versus RDA, a great fight here. RDA, I wouldn't say he's washed up, but definitely isn't the same as he used to be, coming off the loss to Luque. I don't know. I like this fight for Gamrot, not going to lie. He's kind of the younger guy coming into it. So Mateus beat Fiziev in his last fight due to injury. I'm going to go with Gamrot in this one too, beating the older, kind of more experienced RDA in this one. And then you got Caitlin Seminar. I think this used to be Caitlin Chikugian, unless she changed her name. She must have gotten married or something, or divorced. But if she's coming off a divorce, we're going with Macy Barber because Macy Barber, she's also kind of on the come up right now. She just beat Ribas in her last fight. Somewhat of a quick turnaround, but if Caitlin Chugigan got divorced, then she's gonna have some turmoil in her real life outside of fighting, and I think Macy Barber might take advantage of that. Not like it really matters. We won't throw that onto the parlay. And then here we go, Curtis Blades versus Jailton Almeida, pick'em fight. Both two really, probably the two heaviest, the two most grappling heavy fighters in the heavyweight division. Curtis is more just the wrestling pressure guy, take you down, hold you down. And then Jailton is the take you down and submit you. I think he has all finishes, and they might all be first-round finishes. So he's coming off his decision win off Derek Lewis, and then he submitted Rosenstrike before that, who we just saw win the other week in that pretty boring fight night. But, yeah, I like Jailton Almeida here. I think while Curtis Blades might be a little bit bigger than he is, I think Jailton presents more of a threat on the ground submission-wise, because Curtis is just, like I said, he's going to hold you down, he's going to keep you there, and he's going to just pressure you. Really doesn't threaten much submissions, doesn't throw many strikes. Jailton Almeida probably will get another submission victory here over Curtis Blades, or maybe Curtis Blades keeps it on the feet and surprises us and takes Jailton out. But for now, just as a pick'em, I like Jailton here, probably by submission. Moving on to the prelims. Peter Yan versus Song Yadong as the first fight of the night on the prelims, guys. This is UFC 300 caliber fight right here. All of these fights are really. You could swap 299 and 300, and I don't think many people would be complaining. Maybe they would, but it wouldn't be that much of a difference, honestly. You got Peter Yan, former champ, going against Song Yadong. Peter Yan has had a tough few fights. I think his last was the Merab fight, and then obviously before that it was Suga and Sterling. So he hasn't fought since March of last year, and that was just one of the worst fights I've seen in UFC history. Not that he did terrible, but just the relentless takedowns of Merab. It was proved to be too much for him after his 2-fight skid. But, he's never really... Not that Merab outclassed him, because he stuffed... Remember, Merab set the record for attempted takedowns. I think he only really scored, maybe 9. Not that that's not a lot of takedowns, because it is, but I think he attempted over 30. So it's not like Peter Yan is just getting absolutely blown out in these fights. He lost the last one handedly, but it's not like he got his ass beat. And then obviously the Suga fight, a lot of people questioned, but he's fighting Song Yadong, another new young coming guy. He just fought. I know I always reference his fight with Sandhagen because I loved that fight. I think at this point that fight might have been a while ago, but let me see who he's fighting. Yeah, so he's coming off 2 wins. He beat Ricky Simone, and then he had the decision win over Chris Gutierrez. So Song Yadong, I think we predicted both of those fights, actually. And we predicted him to win both of those. I hate to do this just based off of history, but I think we're going to go with Song Yadong here, and Peter Yan is unfortunately going to continue his skid, making it 4 fights in a row. They're not making it easy for him, They're giving him killer after killer. And Song Yadong is no different, a guy who I think is going to be fighting for the title pretty soon. So I think it'll be a close fight, 3-rounder, similar to the Suga fight. And I think Song Yadong's going to beat him, unfortunately. But moving on, we got Gilbert Burns, Jack Della Maddalena. Here's an interesting fight because Gilbert Burns has been fighting, I don't know, he's been kind of jumping around weight classes a lot recently. So the UFC has Jack Della Maddalena at a -120 favorite against Gilbert Burns, and Gilbert Burns is the 4th ranked, and Jack Della is the 11th ranked. I think if the fight stays standing, it's probably in Jack Della's favor. Gilbert can obviously get him down, take him down, and submit him, maybe just control him on the ground, because the BJJ is probably going to trump the Australian wrestling. But I don't see Gilbert doing that. He doesn't utilize his grappling as much as he really should. But I think Jack Della is probably going to beat him. Maybe get the finish. It seems like Gilbert, a lot of recently his performances have been him complaining about why he should have won in the fights that he didn't win, like the Khamzat fight. He's kind of like the Khamzat fight, especially super close, but he kind of just took that as a win, even though it kind of got the notoriety for him. It was, but it's a loss on your record. You lost that fight. He kind of was riding that loss more than I feel he should have, and then he rides into the Bilal fight, and he uses that broken arm as an excuse. But yeah, he's had a tough few string of fights, I guess you could say. So I'm just going to go with Jack Della Maddalena here, but maybe Gilbert turns it around. Another super interesting fight. We have Kevin Holland versus MVP Michael Venom Page. Let's see if the UFC even mentions the fact that Michael Venom Page used to fight in Bellator, or if they just reference that he comes from outside organizations. Great fight for MVP. His first fight in the UFC. This is probably the most entertaining bout they could have picked. Kevin Holland, probably gonna, I wouldn't be surprised if he shot here, if he became a wrestler. He's over the past few years since that Brunson fight, he's really been developing his grappling a lot more. He even got that submission victory over, who was it? Let me check real quick. Who'd he submit? He submitted Chiesa in the first round, yeah, and then loses the decision to Jack Della Maddalena. But yeah, he submitted Chiesa in the first round, dude. So let's not be underestimating his grappling here. I know a lot of people are expecting him to keep it standing maybe, but if you look at the last time Kevin Holland fought a karate stance guy, that was the the Stephen Wonderboy fight, and I think we all know how that fight went. And Michael Venom Page isn't super similar to Wonderboy, but they definitely have similar fight styles. And you know that Michael Venom Page just brings that unorthodox style that no one sees coming. And so if it stays on the feet, I wouldn't be surprised if Michael Venom Page beat Kevin Holland. But I do think that Kevin Holland will take him to the ground, make it maybe one of the more boring Kevin Holland fights we've seen. It'll probably be a little bit grappling heavy. Maybe he gets tagged early by MVP and he realizes, oh shit, maybe this isn't where I want to be. And then he presses him against the fence for maybe half the first round and then submits him in the second or third. That's my prediction. I'm going to go Kevin Holland by submission. And then Benoit Saint-Denis versus Dustin Poirier. This fight is one that has been talked about a lot. And honestly, guys, I really don't see the hype behind it. I might be, maybe this time, next episode, I'm just completely eating my words here. But I really don't think Benoit Saint-Denis is in any shape ready for Dustin Poirier. What I think the UFC is trying to do is I think they're kind of, in a way, almost trying to use Poirier to build Benoit Saint-Denis into a big star. But I think they're rushing him. I think it's going to prove to be far too soon. Kind of similar to, if you remember when Calvin Kattar fought Max Holloway, people were saying that Max Holloway might be in trouble here. This guy's boxing might be too much. People are saying the same thing. For some reason, people think Benoit Saint-Denis he has the ability to stand with Dustin Poirier. I don't think so at all. Unless Poirier has taken a massive step back, I just don't see Benoit Saint-Denis finishing him. And that's coming from a guy Poirier is one of my least favorite fighters. So I just don't see Benoit Saint-Denis getting the finish or getting the win at all. So take for that what you will. But moving on to the main event, Sugar Sean O'Malley versus Chito Marlon Vera 2. A great fight, guys. I'm a huge Sugar Sean fan. Probably one of my favorite fighters in the UFC. Undefeated versus Marlon Vera, who hasn't really earned the title shot. You know, if you look at who he's fought recently, he doesn't have that crazy win over one of these big names. You know, his last win was Pedro Munoz, and before that, he lost to Corey Sandhagen. And he actually did finish Victor Cruz. He actually did finish Dominic Cruz, but, you know, it could easily be somebody else right now fighting Sugar Sean for the belt. I think everybody knows this. The fact that Marlon and Sugar have that history is the only reason he's fighting for the belt. So, yeah, I'm going to go with Sugar. I can see this being a boring fight, honestly. I can see this being a 5-round decision, and maybe some of the fans start to turn on Sugar a little bit. Maybe this is kind of where Sugar has his career could go one of two ways. He could kind of go down that Izzy path and as before he was on his way to the title, he was having these crazy impressive fights and crazy finishes, knocking dudes out. And then once he wins the belt, he kind of doesn't take it easy, doesn't take easy fights, but he kind of takes less risks in fights and knows that you have to come and beat the champ. So that's how I think Sean's going to approach this fight with Chito. I think he's going to be very passive. I don't think he's going to be as aggressive as we usually see him in his old fights because he's already the champ now, you know? And in his mind, Chito didn't beat him, you know? So Chito's going to have to come and take the belt. And in order for him to do that, he's going to have to come at Sugar, and that's exactly what he wants. So I do see Sean beating him, but, you know, maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe Chito's just that kind of guy who has Sean's number, you know. He's his kryptonite. So that's what we're going to go with for the main card, you know. I'm pretty confident in most of these picks. Let's see if we can go back-to-back main card predictions, batting 1,000. So starting at the top, we'll go Sugar Sean, Dustin Poirier, Kevin Holland, Jack Della Maddalena, and Song Yadong. That will be your MMA Minute parlay for UFC 299. Nothing would be more embarrassing than getting all of those wrong after going 1,000 on 298. So before we get to UFC 299 on Saturday, we have Anthony Joshua versus Francis Ngannou fighting on Friday night. And guys, this is another great fight. And us fight fans are blessed this weekend when it comes to fights. Not only is Anthony Joshua versus Francis Ngannou going to be an absolute banger, great match, but we got Zhilei Zhang and Joseph Parker. I don't know if you guys are familiar with those guys, but Zhilei Zhang is an absolute monster. So is Joseph Parker. Two great heavyweight fights on that card. I'm going to ride Zhilei Zhang just because I like the guy. I liked how he was able to finish. Who was it? In his last fight, it was Joe Joyce. He was able to beat Joe Joyce, I think, in his last fight twice in a row. So I'm a huge Zhilei fan, stopping Joe Joyce twice. And then you got Francis Ngannou representing the MMA community for the second time against Anthony Joshua. And if boxing has taught us anything, it's Francis Ngannou is going to need to decapitate Anthony Joshua if he wants to win this fight, guys. Not that I don't think it can happen, but just same way as I doubted him in the Fury fight, and I was proven wrong. Not really wrong because he did lose, but he definitely won the fight in the eyes of the fans. I honestly see this fight kind of going the same way. Joshua's a bit more of a technical boxer, I guess you can say, than Fury is. Fury's more unorthodox. He's fast. He moves really erratically. Joshua's kind of got the more shelled up defense, more technical boxer, more sharp punches. But that might cause the problem for Francis here. But honestly, I don't think there's a boxer that can cause Francis any problems after watching that Tyson fight. So I wouldn't be surprised if Francis did absolutely take his head off. Not that I don't think it won't happen. I just think that's his only way to win. So just a quick little recap of that night. Coming up, today's Wednesday, so we got the UFC press conference tomorrow. Ngannou and Joshua just had their press conference today. Ngannou and Fury had their little back and forth. Fury's probably not going to be too happy about that, but so yeah, that's it for our UFC 298 recap, our UFC 299, and Anthony Joshua versus Francis Ngannou predictions for this weekend, guys. Let's win some money, and let's hope Sugar Sean wins, and let's hope Anthony Joshua gets decapitated.
Drop step out, I'm shaking the block with 4